Caroline, whenever you are ready there.
Yes, it's recording now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody to today's Ask the Recruiter session. So I'm going to do 2 rounds of introduction. So my name is Jennifer. I'm one of the careers advisors in NCI. We are joined by Caroline, Helen and Orla, who are going to be helping to moderate the chat and answer some of the questions within that chat as well. So please feel free to ask questions within the chat throughout the session. The team will be fielding some of the questions directly back to you through the chat, and then some of the questions Orla will be feeding into the panelists. So feel free, if you want to ask something specific to one of them, to put that down, or if you just want a general question to come out, please put that down. But between all of us, we will make sure to get to everybody's questions, either within the session, or we might get back to you once we're finished. Okay, so we're going to cover a few different topics today. So that is going to include questions around applications, talking about networking. We are going to talk about some recruitment processes and maybe how that's changed with COVID as well. And we're going to go through interviewing and then also some positivity around resilience. So like myself, the panelists that we have today all graduated during a time of a recession. So they might have some nice experiences to share about how they actually found jobs themselves and got through tough times the same way that you guys are going through today. So just to introduce everybody, we'll get the panelists to introduce themselves. So I will start, we'll go in alphabetical order. So Aimee, if you would like to go first. So Aimee's a field HR associate at Accenture. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your experience for applying for jobs in 2014 and what it was like to come out of NCI during that time and to get to where you are today.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Delighted to be able to speak to you all today, and thanks a million for taking the time out. I know it's a busy time for people with exams and all the rest of it. So my name is Aimee Walsh, and just to give you a quick intro, I know you're on third there, Jen. So I'm the HR lead in Accenture. So I don't know if people know what Accenture do, but just to give you a bit of context, it's a large multinational organisation. And we provide some outsourcing solutions to some Fortune 500 clients. So basically, we do lots of exciting work, but in layman's terms, we help fix problems that either our clients don't want to do or they can't do. So in terms of my own expertise then, so as Jen mentioned, I'm an alumni of NCI. So I studied with Jen from 2013 to 2014. I studied a master's in human resource management. That was a year-long course. It was probably the best year, I would say, of my life to date. Not that old, but I really, really enjoyed the course and I got a lot out from it. So I think probably, Jen, as we go down through the questions, I can maybe give some experience on what it was like in terms of leaving. I want to let people introduce themselves. Mm-hmm. Is that okay? But I suppose just to let people know, like, I'm going to be looking at this from the experience of a hiring manager and what it's like for me when I'm hiring for roles, okay? And then hopefully I can share some hints and tips and talk about what it was like for me when I was graduating as well, when I graduated in 2014.
Perfect. Thanks, Aimee. So we'll go next to Catherine, who runs the BPL program in LinkedIn. So Catherine actually studied a degree in psychology first and then moved into organizational development. So maybe you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about that transition and how you've used psychology in your HR world as well.
Yeah. First of all, hi everyone. I can't see all of you, but I hope you're having a good summer so far, despite the current circumstances. So yeah, like Jen said, I started off in psychology, and then I actually went and did organizational psychology afterwards as my master's. And initially when I graduated from my degree, and that was in 2012, which was the height of the recession, I think unemployment was like 16% or something. There wasn't like a lot of jobs open in psychology, and a lot of those kind of entry-level jobs were like not paid, so that wasn't really an option for me. So I went and did the master's, and being very practical, I was like, right, I need a job at the end of the day. And where I can see most of the jobs in psychology are kind of in that organizational space, kind of working alongside HR. So I did the organizational psychology degree in Limerick, and it was brilliant. So I was working part-time as well while doing that. So I did it over 2 years and graduated in 2014. So the same as you, Aimee and Jen. And I was kind of lucky. So when I graduated, I spotted a job opportunity in a company called Arista, which is a bakery. So you probably all have eaten like Little Breads, and you know Arista. And it was a talent development kind of specialist graduate role, basically was the role. And I was like, oh great, that's something up my alley, and that was the job I went for, and I was really lucky to get it. Just to kind of, I'll go more into it later, Jen. I could keep waffling on for ages. And then, I started working in LinkedIn in October, and it's really, really good. So happy to answer more questions kind of about how I got the job, etc. later on.
Perfect, thanks. And then Veronika. So Veronika is a technical recruiter at Dell, and we have a lot of international students who are coming from further afield than Slovakia, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your experience in moving to Ireland and how you kind of found the job market here and that transition.
Definitely. Thank you, Jen. So hello, everyone. First of all, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today, and hope you're having a great time. So in terms of my journey, so I have a background in HR. I studied HR resource management in Slovakia, and I actually went out for 1 semester to Belgium. So I suppose that's where my international journey started, because ever since I kind of had at the back of my mind that I really want to go out and kind of get that international experience. I had a part-time job. I started during the college. It was in Dell Technologies. I was an intern in talent acquisition. I was lucky enough not to be that impacted by the recession, so I got the job, and again, it was international environment. I had colleagues and managers from different parts of the world. And after I finished, I kind of wanted to experience different companies, different fields, again, with the international aspect at the back of my mind. So I started a recruiter job, and I kind of always wanted to go abroad, which then happened 2 years ago when I moved to Ireland and returned back to Dell. And the experience was great. It was amazing from the candidate perspective. I probably didn't expect the move to be so smooth. I arrived, I was lucky enough as I was able to stay with my colleague who had a spare room at that time. So we all know how the housing situation can be challenging in Ireland. So I went through that. The team was very accommodating as well, giving enough flexibility to sort out all the paperwork. So that was absolutely fantastic. And I suppose in terms of comparing maybe the recruitment, I know we'll be talking about it later, but the recruitment is probably the same. We're always looking for the best candidates to join the role. The major difference would be probably in the companies, and every company has a different recruitment process, different culture, different values that they're looking at. So that was my experience.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have loads of questions, so we'll just get straight into them, and we're going to start with some questions around CVs and applications. So Veronika, maybe I can start with you. So we know that the market is particularly competitive at the minute. How many applications might you get in a graduate role?
Yeah, so it is very competitive indeed. So on average, we can get around 150 applications per graduate role. It depends on the role. It can be even higher. I even experienced 200-300, but we really try to set the expectations and set the application deadline in the job description. So we kind of show the candidates when they can apply. But we make sure we go through all of the CVs, so we really give the chance to everyone. We obviously short the best ones and most relevant for the interview. So yeah, it is competitive, but we're trying to be transparent and fair to everyone.
Perfect. And Catherine, in your program, so when you're hiring graduates, maybe can you talk about the starting number and then how that trickles down as you progress?
Yep, and just so you know, I do have a little visitor here, so there might be some small interruptions. I'm still here.
Yep, you're back.
I'm here. Okay, great. So yeah, so we get now it would vary year on year, but roughly 1,000 applicants from the outset, and that would be last year. It was for the incoming cohort, it was for 40 roles. And how we trickle that down is, first of all, there's a CV screen, and basically that involves, we have a recruitment team and they actually deal with that. So I wouldn't really be dealing with CVs at that point. It would be a little bit later on, but they would go through the CVs, see if the candidates are meeting the kind of competencies and experience that we're looking for. And we'd list all this on our website. We'd also look at things like language capabilities, because we do hire for different languages, and we'd be checking to see if that person is eligible to work in Ireland. So we are not in the position to sponsor visas, unfortunately, because for the languages we hire, they're all European. The next stage is a recruiter phone screen. So that's basically a half-hour chat with the recruiter over the phone. We might have up to 200, 300 recruiter phone screens. So it's actually a huge body of work that the recruiters do. It's unbelievable. And then the next stage is we have kind of an interview, and there's also a sales call that they do. It's kind of like a mock call. So our graduate program is for sales. So we basically develop them to be really, really good salespeople and try and develop those leadership skills at the same time. So we're kind of testing out those skills in the sales call. We're seeing, do they have that capability? Are they really, really interested? Do they want it? And also we're asking them the kind of questions to see what their competencies are like in the interview. And then the final stage is when they come into us, and we basically get them to do it's kind of a group piece. So they have to do a case study as a group, and then they present that case study. And then from then we send out offers. So it's kind of quite clear cut. Yeah. The one thing that we would do differently would be we wouldn't have psychometrics. So we don't incorporate them into our screening process.
Great. So maybe, Aimee, just to finish up that question, I don't know if you know the numbers of your graduate program, just a big number as to how many people you think apply for those roles through graduates.
Yeah, it's similar to Catherine. It's above 1,000, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's just move on. So we want to make sure that we're giving a good impression on our CVs when we submit them. So Veronika, maybe what's the best way, one tip to make a positive impression on the CV?
Right. So I suppose from my experience, obviously we understand that for graduate roles we're talking about graduates who might not necessarily have the experience, the exposure, and all of the necessary skills. So we're really are looking mostly at obviously the college and it may be internships, but also I suppose any projects that they might be working on and the technologies that they got exposure to during those projects. So for me, what is really important is to kind of match the CV towards what the role is about. So it's easy for us, the recruiters, to kind of understand where the skills are. So that would be number one for me.
Excellent. And maybe Catherine then, so you have maybe seen these CVs at a slightly later stage in your application process, but what is something that recently that you've seen that's really impressed you?
I have to say that I've been pretty impressed by all of the CVs I've seen, but I've worked a little bit with people who are not in LinkedIn who kind of wanted CV polishing up. And I suppose one thing I'd see, the really great CVs, people are very good at illustrating the impact that they have in the experience they had. So kind of echoing on what Veronika was saying, obviously, like a lot of the graduates don't have that experience yet. They haven't had that opportunity, or they might have experience in different areas, and that's totally fine. If you look at the competencies and the skills that are listed in the job description, and you think about, okay, well, how have I demonstrated, for example, communicating effectively? I might have demonstrated that in a different job or in a project that I did in college or some other extracurricular activity. So really try and sell those skills and tailor your CVs to match the competencies and skills that are being called out by the employer. And a suggestion I would have is that sounds very labor intensive. Let's say you're looking at like kind of two related areas. Say you're looking at HR and on the other hand, you're looking at communications. You're interested in both areas. Have like a HR CV and a communication CV, and they'll have to be a bit different. And then the end result is you don't have to work quite as hard to tailor each CV to each employer. I'm trying to think of another thing. Just to try and avoid too much jargon, try and make it really, really clear about what you did achieve, what your impact was. And, you know, don't not include something because you think, oh, that job isn't related to this job. You know, if there's some skill there, do include it anyway. You'd be surprised what's relevant.
Amazing. That's so good. Okay, so we want to move on to a question that's a little bit related. So someone asked about how you integrate keywords into your CV. So would somebody
happy to jump in. Again, you know, look at those competencies and skills that are listed and post them in, if you can, if they're relevant.
Okay, great.
I think as well, so one tip that I would give to people, and what I've seen in my own experience as well from screening CVs. So when you're in college, right, and when you're studying, you might not necessarily have the professional experience, right? So you mightn't have worked in a company, you might not have the experience. And I know we're going to touch on that, but just always make sure that your CV is formatted. So it's, you know, it has that standout impact. So you have your name, you have your profile, you have your professional qualification, you have your education right up at the top, because that's really key. That's what we want to see. You know, most employers know that you guys are fresh out of college. So what we really want to see is exactly what Catherine has said. We want to see that you can summarize your key responsibilities, what your key achievements have been. And as well, a big thing, certainly in Accenture, is around your key skills. So what skills do you have that are relevant to the job? So that means that you really need to know the job spec inside out. So what key skills can you bring? Is it web framework? Is it communication skills? Is it problem solving skills? That's what needs to stand out to us when we're reviewing CVs. And also, just one great CV that I saw last week actually was someone sent me in a CV that had a timeline of everything to date right up at the top. So I didn't even have to skim down through the CV, even though I would, because I want to see what that person's worked on and what the responsibilities have. But they basically summarized it in a timeline of all the key achievements. And I thought that was super impressive. They shown that they had put a lot of time into their CV, and it basically made me easy for me to read as well when reviewing it. So that would be my kind of top tip on CV application anyway.
Maybe
Great.
one piece of advice from my side, what really helped me is to ask for feedback. So have your CV read by someone else before submitting it. Just have a sense check if it makes sense for an external person, you know, who maybe don't know you or what you did, and just ask for feedback.
Perfect. So we might just go, or I think you have a question from the group.
Yes, so a question has just been dropped into the chat there. So what if we are not fresh out of college and we have considerable experience and we're just changing careers?
I'm happy to give my 2 cents on that. So if you're not out of college, so the question was, we're not fresh out of college, we have considerable experience and we're changing careers. So I suppose to understand that question further, would you have considerable experience in the actual role that you're interviewing for? Or is it that you don't have the experience required for the role? But I'm happy to answer both perspectives. So if I look at my own experience, when I graduated in 2014, my most recent job was an MRI assistant. Okay, so I was in the boat, as Jen talked about, where I didn't have much HR experience. So I joined Accenture straight out of college, and when I was looking at roles in HR in my final year, there was very few. And I always said to myself, and I know we're going to talk about this later about resiliency, I wasn't going to let that get me down. There was lots of recruitment type roles, but there wasn't any HR business partner type roles. And that was my dream role. That was the role I really wanted. But the opportunity came up to take the recruitment role in Accenture, which is my first role within the company. And I took that. So what I would say to people who feel like they don't have experience built up, like, get the experience somehow. So when I was an MRI assistant, I knew I wanted to be working in HR. So I went up to the HR manager at the time. I said, can I get more experience in HR? Can I take on more responsibility? I explained to her what I was doing. She luckily gave me loads of experience, so I could add that onto my CV, which did in fact help my application when I went for my role within Accenture. And therefore that built up experience. I think another way of staying really relevant is maybe you're in a job right now where you can't get the experience in the specific field that you work in. And I'm just thinking of like any of those techie type roles or maybe accounting type roles. What you can do then is you can try and, I suppose, constantly upskill. So, think of online courses that you can do. Think of things that you can do to constantly upskill so that when you're going for an interview and you know that you necessarily don't have all the experience, you can say to that person, well, here's everything that I've done. Here's what I've done to stay relevant while I've been looking for an opportunity. And I'm not sure if I might have gone a bit off course there. But hopefully that answered your question. Let us know, obviously, if not.
No, I think that was great, Aimee. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll just do one more question around CVs and then I think we'll move on to the next section. So there were a couple questions that came in around what is sort of like an automatic screen out, or what is an absolutely don't do this on a CV? What is going to get your CV ejected out of an automated screening system? What are some key don't do's for a CV? We can go, maybe Veronika, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, so we're actually quite new to the automatic CV selection, so it's just being introduced as we speaking. I would say, the most important thing is contact details. So a lot of times we come across CVs that look absolutely amazing, all the skills that we need, but somehow the contact details are missing. So there's no way how we can reach out to the person. So just double check, triple check that your phone number and your email are correct and up to date. I suppose just be relevant towards what the job description is about. You might be applying for 2 or 3 different roles in 2 or 3 different fields that might be somehow related, but just at the very beginning, when you state your values and your motivation, what you want to do, just kind of apply it for the specific role that you're applying for. And you can even tweak the CV based on the role that you're applying for.
Great. Okay, perfect. Do either of you, Aimee or Catherine, want to add anything to that, or we move on?
I think what we've seen, and if we look at the grad program, so how do you compete with, and I know that might be a question some people have if you're getting thousands of applications. What I see in terms of mistakes is a lot of the times it fails at the application stage. So you can tell that not enough time has been put into the application. Some people are skipping parts just to get to the end of it, because it can be a bit of a lengthy application process, and you can tell when someone loses concentration. They're all energized at the start, but then just as they get to the end of it, they lose focus, they lose interest. Other things we've seen is repetitive, so people are repeating what they've already said above, answering questions just for the sake of it. And another tip that I would say, and I was guilty of this myself as well, is we have in some cases seen where people have actually copied and pasted requirements of other job specs, and they've mentioned other companies in the application. So just to be mindful of that, because I know when you are graduating college, if you were anything like me at the time, which we can happily talk about, I was applying like no end for roles. But just key lesson is apply attention to detail. You know, treat your application like you would a one for all voucher. That's the best I can say to you, and really just put the time and the effort into it, because it will pay off. It is time consuming, it is a bit lengthy, but we can so tell whether someone has put time into it or hasn't put time into it. And also from a computer perspective then, so obviously we have a large amount of applications, so it will be they will be filtered through based on skills. So when you're filling out the application, make sure that your skills are relevant, that you know what your skills are, and that that's called out in your application as well.
Perfect, thanks so much. So Catherine, just one last question for you then. So does it make any difference to you if a student applies with a master's degree or just an undergrad?
To be honest, not really. Like, we don't differentiate in terms of anyone can get in from undergraduate degree upwards. We get quite a mix of both, depends on what countries they're applying from. One difference I would kind of see maybe is that they'd be a bit older and a bit more mature, maybe a bit more experienced if they're coming from a master's degree.
Okay, great. Ola, you've got your hand up, so we might go to you.
Yeah, so there was just a couple of questions. Now, one I'm not sure I understand from Lucas. It's about, is it possible to add in our second background? So I think what he means is he has a previous degree in marketing, and he just wondered then, should he put in that degree as well, you know? So that's a question. I'll just throw another one at you then. When companies do mass recruitment, is there any specific time frame in Ireland?
Just in the time frame, it varies from company to company, but yeah, there can be time frames for these kind of programs. And sorry, I would put down your experience, your degree in marketing. That would be, you know, you've probably gained some valuable skills and insights from doing that. That is a good advertisement. So.
Yeah, I think definitely put it down, even for the sake of having a timeline on the CV, so that we see, you know, how did you progress, you know, whether you studied or had any experience at the time, as that would be addressed if there was a gap in the CV. So that would be my advice there.
Perfect, thanks. So we might just move on to a couple of questions around international students. So Veronika, I might start with you for this one, if that's okay. So for international students, there's a bit of a debate over whether or not to include visa status on the CV. Would you leave it in or take it out? How would you approach that?
Yeah, very good question. So as for Dell Technologies, some of our roles are open for visa students. Some of them are unfortunately not. But from my experience, I would definitely advise to put it on the CV, just list it there. Also, whether it's, you know, STEM 2 or STEM 1G, and when approximately will you receive that. It just gives us the little bit of clarity when we can expect you to perhaps start a job, or just kind of set the expectations from the very beginning, whether or not we can consider you in the process. And also for us to set the expectations with the hiring managers on, you know, how we can, I suppose, manage and outline the hiring process.
Great, thanks so much. And then maybe this one for anybody who'd like to answer it. So it can be difficult for international students to get roles in Ireland. Do you have any tips for these students in terms of job hunting and getting their applications maybe together?
Well, we look for a lot of people with different languages. So, I mean, there's always loads of opportunities for people who have, you know, speak other languages other than English would be one thing I would suggest. And there's probably some good groups you could connect with on LinkedIn that would help you connect with other international students and help you build up your network there as well.
Great, thank you. And Ola's got your hand, you've got your hand up again, so I'll go back to Ola for the chat.
Yeah, grand. Did we answer the question, by the way, just on the time scale, the time frame for mass recruitment? Is there, did we say that? You did?
I think Catherine was saying that it would vary from company to company, but I think Aimee and Veronika, you'd have your own timelines.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
for graduate roles, we would typically start in September, October to kind of advertise, build the candidate pool, allow the graduates to apply, and then around, I suppose, October, November, even December time, we would start with the assessment centres, interviews, and the whole recruitment process. But again, it depends from role to role. Some of the programs that we're running in Dublin that are in tech support or sales might have even later timelines and start maybe in February, March. So
Okay, yeah. So that wasn't the only one. I just wanted to check back on that. So we have one for Aimee. How should a candidate prepare for successfully applying for analytics graduate program in Accenture if they're switching from a sales experience to data analytics?
Oh, okay. So, disclaimer, my background is not in analytics, okay? So I'm going to keep this quite generic, all right, in terms of how I would prepare for an interview in general. But what I would say to you there is, so if you're applying in a company, make sure, first of all, that you know what the company's mission statement is about or what their core values are about. Check and see if there's been any press releases, if there's any exciting work that you know the company are doing. For graduates, then know a bit about the program, know a bit about what the program offers. And for our graduate program, this is all highlighted on our website. I think then, so just to maybe, I might explain our graduate program very quickly in case people are interested, but the graduate program in Accenture, you can apply for it. So at the minute we're taking applications, the applications will open mid-September for September next year. And what the actual program looks like. So you can apply for the graduate program, and there's 3 work streams that you can enter in on the graduate program. So it's analytics, there's consulting, and then there's technology. And I won't go into the specifics of all of them because you know I'd be here forever. But if you do want more information, you can look through the website. So basically, the graduate program then. So it's 5 stages, so it's quite lengthy. And this is why I really can't emphasize the groundwork that you need to put into making sure from the get-go that your CV is very concise, you know, that it highlights the key skills that are required. So you need to understand what the graduate program entails. What would a job within Accenture look like if you were successful in one of those 3 multidisciplinary fields that I mentioned? So you'll go through the first stage of our graduate program is an online application. So you'll need to complete an online application with your education, any experience that you have to date, and that will then be filtered through to the screening team. And if you're successful in that phase, you'll go through to an online assessment discovery portal, which is basically it's basically like an assessment type center, and it will test your ability and your aptitude. So it is a psychometric test in a way. It will be looking at your ability, and it depends on one of the fields that you interview for. So if you're interviewing for a tech graduate program, they'll ask you some numerical questions. They might ask you some techie questions in that, and they'll be overall testing your personality. They'll be testing your skill set. They want to know what skills can you bring. Then if you're successful in that, the turnaround time for that is usually 5 days, and then you'll get the opportunity to attend an Accenture event, and that'll be just to make sure that you get a deeper insight into life at Accenture, and then you'll have a final, if you're successful there, you'll have a final interview stage with the managing director. So it is like long, I will say. I think just to go back to your question, because I do have a tendency to wander off the point, so apologies. In terms of preparing, so make sure you know the mission statement, make sure you know the core values, make sure you know the role that you're applying for inside out. You know, make sure that you can relate it back to the experience you have, that the achievements you have, and like, just remember, it is a sales pitch. You need to sell yourself. So don't be shy in selling it, but make sure that you are clear on what the key skills and the attributes are of the role and what key skills you can bring. And then the final thing I will say, just from an interview perspective, I love to see somebody who comes in and has prepared for an interview like they would an exam. So, and I can so tell straight away who is prepared and who hasn't prepared. I can tell within 5 minutes. really who has prepared. And I'm sure Veronika and Catherine are the same. But what I specifically like for HR type roles is if you can come in and use the STAR technique. So what the situation, what the task, what the action, what the result was, and, you know, bang it out like that. And I'm super impressed. And if you can also relate what the job spec is to some of your key achievements. And I suppose, you know, you are in college, so you might not have the experience, but don't let that get you down. Don't let that stop you. You need to build up the experience, and you need to think about all of the key things that you've worked on. Like, what's your experience being like in college? What have you achieved maybe in your part-time job? You know, just really sell yourself. So they're the types of things that we like to see from that perspective.
Great, thanks so much. Ola, you've got your hand up again.
Yes, they're coming in fast and furious. So just a couple of questions there. So they're studying data analytics. Again, it's kind of in a work-related field. They have 2 or 3 years of experience, but not in the area of the roles, and they wonder if they should avoid applying for the roles if they don't have the specific requirement, or would you take into consideration a person without all the job requirements? And just on that, if I could throw in another one at the same time for Accenture there, Aimee, you again, if somebody's worked in Accenture in India, do they have an advantage in Ireland?
Well, we answer the first question first. Maybe Veronika, would you like to take that one about the skills on the job spec?
Right. So I suppose we would definitely consider that person. So if I understand it correctly, it's someone who studied the data analytics but doesn't necessarily have a hands-on experience in the field. So of course, if that person is applying, say, for a graduate role or say entry-level role, definitely. I mean, if the technologies they had exposure to, or if generally like they're matching the role that we're looking for, I would kind of suggest to look at the transferable skills. So they might not necessarily have hands-on experience in data analytics, but what else can they bring to the role? It can be maybe they worked in a role where they had to communicate a lot with customers. So there's the communication skills that might be also helpful for the data analytics role. So we would definitely consider someone who doesn't necessarily have the exposure. And what we're looking for at Dell Technologies is mostly the right attitude and the willingness to learn, the approach, and the aptitude as well. So.
Great. Aimee, would you like to go? Are you able to answer the Accenture question? Would you like it repeated again?
That's okay. I think I got the gist of it. If I work in Accenture India before, can I apply for a role in Accenture Dublin? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you obviously have worked in Accenture before, you do have that little bit of competitive advantage. So I think we're going to talk about networking in the next section, but yeah, absolutely, you can.
Great. Okay, we might actually, so Aimee, you'd mentioned interviewing, so we might actually go to interviewing first and then come back to networking right afterwards. And you talked about the STAR technique being something that really impressed you. So I might go back to Catherine and say, you know, what are some of the things that maybe the top 3 reasons that you see students failing in an interview, or what can be something that actually goes wrong that you see that unprepared sense?
Yeah. Sometimes people don't actually answer the question that we've asked, or they don't finish the question. So one of the things that I'm always like, oh no, we do try and coach people almost to answer a question fully if they're struggling. But one thing that sometimes happens is they forget to do the or at the end. They forget about the result. Or they just kind of skim over it and they don't provide us with enough detail. But that's actually sometimes the most important part. You know, the situation is the situation. We really want to see, how did you deal with that situation and how did you respond? And sometimes it's great to add the L onto it, like, what did you learn from it? So if it wasn't an example where you were a resounding success, let's say it's a question about resilience and it was a tough time for you, you know, maybe you could talk about, well, this is what I've learned from it, and maybe, you know, this is how it's helped me, you know, in other situations. So just kind of remember to try and answer all parts of the question. Do explain what the impact was and what you've learned, because we do like to see people who are eager to learn and who have that kind of learning mindset as well.
Great. Aimee or Veronika, would you like to add anything to that about, your experience in interviews and where students maybe kind of some pitfalls that they can maybe avoid?
I would say from my side, what really helps is when the students do a really thorough research on the company, on the values. When they go the extra mile and maybe go to Glassdoor, go to LinkedIn, go to the company's website, and really know what they're going into, what maybe even the company's products are, because usually, it shows the motivation. It might sound like a cliche, but it's a different conversation when someone tells you that, I want to work for XY company because it's a huge international company. And when someone comes in and tells you that, oh, wow, fantastic products, and I absolutely love the culture, and I read, this and that, or maybe this was something that I read and it was concerning me. Can you tell me more about it? So it triggers really interesting conversations when they do the research. So that would be definitely my advice there.
Excellent, thanks. Ola, you've got your hand up again, so we jump back to you.
Yeah, I'm one of those annoying students that keeps their hand up. What do you think is the key soft and hard skills that a master's graduate should have in order to have an advantage while applying for business management and operations roles? Can I throw in another one? It's a little one. Another one then, are graduate programs aimed only at young graduates, or do they also apply to older career changers?
So I'm happy to take the graduate program aimed only at young graduates. No, it's open to all ages. So there is no age factor on it. So you can apply, for a graduate program. One thing I would say as well is, just very quickly, I've seen one question and I know I'll forget, is around when, so obviously I mentioned about our graduate programs not starting until September for next year, but don't let that stop you guys. As I said, you need to get experience. So if you have applied for a graduate program and it doesn't start until next year, think of ways of how you can keep yourself busy and think of ways of how you can gain experience. And the other thing I would say is that graduate programs are not always the be all and the end all either, so it sounds very nice, it sounds very fancy about going in on a graduate program and all the rest of it, but a role is a role. Make sure it's the right role for you, and that's the most important thing. So I just thought I'd answer that before I forget. Sorry, gone off tangent again.
Perfect, Aimee, thank you. And then, sorry, all of the other question, what was?
Well, the other question was, about whether it should be the older career changer, but it's not. That you've kind of answered that, Aimee. That, so then there are some other questions. So I'll just dive straight into them. Will the interviews be mostly online or face to face? Is one question, and then the other one was, if somebody has actually applied to the company and they don't get it, or at least they're not eligible for it, do they have to wait 3 or 6 months before they can apply again?
I don't mind answering that. So if they apply for a role and they don't get it, I'm sure it's the same probably for Veronika and Catherine, but no, they can apply again. Obviously it would be for a different role, but there wouldn't be a restriction on them applying.
Yeah, just in terms of applying, obviously, like they're very welcome to apply again. We even encourage, after giving feedback, maybe, this could be improved, or you should work on this competency. But it also, we leave it up to the candidate to consider the time that they need to really work on this skill. So we would advise, take your time, re-evaluate, come back, think back at the interview. What were the questions that might have sounded trickier, or which you were not so confident with, and again, apply at the time when you feel confident and that you will be able to answer those questions.
And just to echo that, I think it really shows that you're interested in the company if you apply more than once. I think for some people it can be a bit intimidating to apply a second time if they weren't accepted the first time, but you know, don't be deterred if you don't get it in the first go. We've had applicants apply at least 2 times, and one of our new graduates who's going to be starting next year, I think she's been, you know, she applied 3 times. And she did kind of have to develop her skills a bit more, but like, you know, you're kind of like, wow, this person is really wants the role, you know, you're rooting for them at that point. So
great, thank you. Okay, so maybe we'll get back to some of the questions that we had before the session. So what would be a question that you'd like to be asked at the end of an interview? So I'll leave that open to anybody if you've heard any good questions from candidates before.
I can start. For me, there's no specific question per se that I want to hear, but it's just the genuine interest that the candidates have into the role and the willingness to know more about it. So not only what's maybe in the job description or what they can Google, but something, you know, around the team dynamics, around the culture, around the team structure, around the career possibilities, or even the challenges. Like, we try to really set the realistic expectations, because you know, when you go through a role, there definitely at some stage will be some challenges. So what those are. So yeah, those will be the questions.
Perfect. And would you like people to follow up with you after an interview and you know, maybe send you a note or something like that?
I always appreciate it. When there is a when there is a quick note, it really makes my day. You know, when someone just comes back again, when it's genuine and we had a good conversation, they come back. It resonates with me.
Great. Okay, we'll go back to Ola again.
Yes, so an international student with work experience, if we apply for an opening of the experienced role with a student visa, is it true that our resumes are not oh, sorry, I think I did that one, didn't I? They're not considered again for the next 3 or 6 months, but that's not the case. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Just on the timing of graduate roles, is there usually only one intake per year? And if we're graduating in, say, January, early February, and they're looking at a wait until September, would that be an issue? Considered an issue? So they literally have to wait, if you like, until September before they start.
that wouldn't be an issue on our side. We did a lot of that, where people might be waiting for close to a year, and they might do different things in between. You know, that's just the reality of a lot of the programs they have. There's a long time between actually starting and being hired.
Great. And how is a candidate considered in Ireland when they have IT experience, but it's not related to their coursework? Would they be hired as an experienced candidate or as a graduate?
So that would probably depend on the role that they're applying for. So I don't know if we can probably be specific on that question, but it all depends on the role they're applying for and what the requirements are of the role.
I think that's, I might just chime in there a little bit, that, you know, if you are applying for a role that is an experienced role, but you feel like you fit the requirements of the role and you feel like you read the job description and you can do the job, then you are applying for an experienced role. If you're reading a job description which is more targeted at a green role that's for a graduate, and you're like, I've actually just learnt this stuff in college and maybe don't have that much experience, then you are applying for that graduate role. And you might end up applying for some experienced roles and for some graduate roles, and maybe you have 2 CVs that reflect those 2 different levels of your experience in different areas. Okay, great. Let's move on. We're going to move on to a couple questions around networking and then just finish up around some sort of resilience questions. So this is a very general question. So what networking advice would you have for students? And I'll just open this up to anybody who'd like to start.
I can start then. So My suggestion would be, and I know that we're in unprecedented times at the moment, and it's really difficult to connect virtually and through Teams and Zoom and kind of these video conferences, because it's really different to meeting people in person. But I would say still keep engaged and attend events, even similar to this, events that your career advisors are organizing. Always get the chance to attend when there is a company presenting. There are multiple conferences in different fields, so just kind of a lot of the stuff is for free. Just you just need to sign up. So it's just about kind of your willingness to go this extra mile to build the network. And another thing will be around LinkedIn to kind of get engaged in those groups. And I think Catherine will be able to answer that one better. But yeah, there are specific groups, targeted for, let's say, different skills, like software engineering, for example, or even international groups, as someone already mentioned. So just join them, engage, contribute. You can even contribute with your own work. If you have any blogs or any ideas you want to share with the audience, it's definitely great to put it out there.
Great. Maybe Catherine, you can jump in and talk a little bit about maybe like the etiquette of either contributing in a LinkedIn group or even the etiquette of connecting with people through LinkedIn as well.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the etiquette, if you're reaching out to somebody to connect to them, be clear in terms of why you're reaching out to them, because sometimes, I mean, I'm sure all of you have experienced this. You might get requests from people you don't know, and you're like, I'm not quite sure why they're reaching out to me. Do they think I'm someone else, or are they just kind of connecting with everybody? So if you do want to connect with somebody specific because they're working in the industry you want to work in or something like that, just mention that. Just be considerate of who you're reaching out to and your motivations. Another thing about LinkedIn is, I mean, shameless plug, I think it's more valuable than ever at the moment, because we're not getting those opportunities to interact face to face. And for some people, that's great news. They don't like networking. I mean, it's not for everybody. But, really get your brand out there. Make sure that your profile is showcasing you to the best that it can, showcasing your skills, your achievements. Try to make sure you try and use all of LinkedIn's features as well. So if you can share articles that you thought were interesting, that are relevant to your industry, if you have, as Veronika was saying, if you want to contribute blog posts yourself, that's another really wonderful way to showcase, your interests and your knowledge, and to kind of get your brand out there. So I would say really use the platform to its fullest extent. There's a lot of features, that you can use, and make sure that you're maximizing your profile as well. There's also a lot of groups on LinkedIn, professional groups that you can join, and they can be a great way to start conversations with people. Sorry about the whooping in the background. My 3-year-old is in the room and being very noisy, so I'll wrap that up.
Great. And then maybe Aimee, will just jump to you, and I might just ask you a little bit around like people contacting you through LinkedIn, and they know that you work in Accenture, and they're like, great, I'll message Aimee, and what are the kind of realities around that?
Yeah, I suppose I'd agree with everything Catherine has said there. I suppose just if like LinkedIn's a great platform. It's actually something I don't use that often. I go on it every now and again, but I'm not great for using it. But it is a great platform, and I'm always more than happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. But I think, if you're using it as a networking platform, as Catherine said, like make sure that you're specific on what you want to connect with that person. So, like I tend to get a lot of messages around, have you any open roles in technology, or and I can't advise on that, because I try and direct people that come to me and say you need to go to the careers marketplace. But like if there's someone from HR, like I do get students that reach out to me and they might be conducting surveys and they might want my help with it. And so I think, like for me, what I'd like from people, if they're connecting and if they want something specific from me, is just to say what they want. And just make sure you check the profile of the person you're connecting with as well. So, if they work in HR, it doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm just using me as an example, that they work in recruitment, so make sure it's the right person that you're connecting with, because it's time management. It's saving time for yourself, and it's also saving time for the person that you're connecting with. And it shows that you have actually good time management skills if you can be that savvy around the connection as well.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So Orla, do we have maybe one more question from you before we just wrap up the session?
Would you take two?
Or take two, but we'll give them to us one.
One's very short. Do you consider cover letters is the short one? And then if you have a chance to be referred by a friend, what is that whole process?
I can jump in on the...
We've just lost all of that. So, okay, well,
sorry.
Jump on the cover letter one if you would go with that.
Oh, that for me, it's a very quick answer. Cover letters are great, include them if they're, and just keep them relevant, don't keep them too long.
Same for me.
Then the other one. Yeah, sorry, Aimee.
Oh no, I was just saying same for me. I do love a good cover letter, and I think if you don't want to include a cover letter, make sure that your profile is very concise and to the point. But yeah, I do like a good cover letter, I have to say.
And do you have referrals? And what is the process there like? Or are they just entered into the process like everybody else?
We have a referral program. The one thing you need to consider is, and this is probably the same for Dell and Accenture as well, is it needs to be a genuine referral. So I've had people who've had one interaction with me online, and then they've asked me for a referral. I'm like, I actually can't. I have to have some professional experience or some real life experience with you. So that's just something to be considered as well if you're asking for a referral.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So we'll just move on to our last couple of questions and then we'll wrap it up. So some of you, so Aimee and Catherine, graduated that lovely 2012 to 2014 period. So what, if you have one piece of advice for students who are graduating at the minute, what would that be?
Okay, so one piece of advice would be, well, when I was doing my final year, I had big dreams of grandeur, that I wanted to work in a massive company, that was just the dream. I wouldn't work for anybody unless it was a big company. And what I will say is, when you leave college, you might not get the role that you necessarily want to do, but look at the company, look at the opportunities, and it doesn't need to be a big company to have opportunities. Like I took the role in Accenture, and I probably shouldn't say this, but at the time I knew I wasn't going to stay long term in that role. I knew that if I got my foot in the door, that I'd prove myself, I'd work hard, and I'd get to where I have got to now. So I suppose to leave it on a note, just do your research and don't get deflated if it's not the right role. Like if you're determined, if you proved that you can work hard, if you can join a company and you can network, you can leverage the people around you, make sure your name is known for the right reasons. And then, it'll come to you. What's for you won't pass you by, I say. So the only piece of advice I give students is really don't stress. It took me 5 months to get a role when I finished, and I was lucky at 5 months. It takes some people longer. So don't stress, do your research. And if it's not the right role right now, that doesn't mean that you won't find the right role in the future. So that's just the piece of advice I would give.
Great, thank you. Catherine, what about yourself?
I would echo a lot of Aimee's advice. And I think one thing that you did that was quite interesting is you did some job crafting in your role when you were working as an MRI assistant, and you proactively went and asked for that experience that was going to help you get in the door. And I think that's something to really consider. How can you shape your job to suit what you want to do if you're not getting that role just yet, or if you're in a part-time job now? Maybe there's some way that you can build up some experience. Maybe there's something there. Another thing I would suggest is, keep reminding yourself of what you have to offer. It can be deflating when you are applying, and you're not getting anywhere. And it happens to most people at some point. But just remind yourself of the value that you have added to other companies. And when you do get in the door, really aim to add value to that business as well. So you, as Aimee mentioned, you want to get your name known for the right reasons. And sometimes I'm so sorry. Sometimes what I've seen is, honey, I'll deal with it in one moment. There's a spider apparently. Okay, I'll get the spider. What I've seen is where people might be resilient to change. So say, for example, businesses change all the time and they face different challenges. So if you can adapt to the changes that are needed to the business, your boss is going to appreciate that. So that would be another piece of advice I would have.
Amazing. And then maybe we'll just finish up. So Veronika, we often get students telling us that they've applied for dozens and dozens of jobs and they just aren't getting anywhere with it. So what would be maybe something that you can suggest to somebody who is kind of just going through that, applying and not moving forwards?
I would say one of the key things would be feedback. So ask for feedback after an interview, ask for the areas that you should be working on, and then act on it. So a lot of times I've seen people who were interviewed, and we want you to succeed. So don't forget that. We really, really want you to succeed. So and I've seen candidates who weren't successful at the first stage, then made it to the second stage, weren't successful, but eventually they made it to the company, and they're just brilliant. So just take the feedback and act on it, and sooner or later, I'm sure there is a role waiting for everyone. And then I suppose just keep an open mind. Think of your skills, transferable skills, where, for what roles can you actually apply them. Know what you want, but keep an open mind.
Great, thank you. And Ola's got her hand up. So if there's a burning question, Ola, we'll take it quickly because we're at 6 o'clock. So.
Okay, so it's a very specific question and it's to Catherine, and it's about a coding assessment within your company. This student got 80% in the coding and it wasn't enough, is what he's saying, and he's a chance to do it again. What course should he do on LinkedIn, he's asking?
Well, I would need to know the job you're applying for, what kind of coding you were doing. So I recruit salespeople. So it'll be a bit different. You're obviously in a technical space. I would ask, did you get feedback in terms of where you lost? What was the story with that 20%? Was there a particular area that you could improve? I don't know if you had to do different types of coding or was it just one type? But maybe look for feedback and target it that way would be my suggestion anyway. Oh, and another thing would be if you know anyone else who has got through it, maybe reach out to them as well.
Great. Thank you, Catherine.
Was that it, Ola, or did you have anything else?
No, that's it. People are beginning to leave now, so everyone seems to be satisfied, I think, with all the questions. We've asked them all.
Perfect. Okay, so look, thank you so much, everybody, for attending, all of the students, and of course to Aimee, Catherine and Veronika. That was amazing. So thank you so much for answering all of those questions that came in today. And yeah, for the students, we will have this recording up on Moodle in the next day or two. So if you missed anything or you want to go back to it, look out for it then. If we didn't get to your question today, hopefully Helen and Caroline were able to answer it. But if not, again, we will put the questions and stuff up on Moodle for you. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely Thursday evening. I hope you get some sunshine today. And yeah, we will talk to everybody shortly.
Thanks a million, everyone. Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.